Get ready. Right now, in the spring of 2026, something is building across the American heartland and across the warming atmosphere of this planet that every single person with a family, a home, a car, a neighborhood needs to understand. Severe storms are about to explode, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech designed to grab your attention. Literally, physically, meteorologically explode. Supercells igniting without warning across the Central Plains, EF4 tornadoes grinding through cities in the middle of the night, baseball-sized hail shattering windows and caving in rooftops across neighborhoods that had no warning until the sirens were already too late, and flash flooding turning streets into rivers with a speed that gives people minutes, not hours, to react. This is not a prediction about some distant future season. It is a description of what is happening right now, what has already happened in the past few weeks alone, and what the science of a warming atmosphere tells us is coming with increasing frequency and force for every season ahead. Stay alert, because the numbers behind the current reality of severe storms in America are more shocking than most people realize. Severe storms, defined as thunderstorms that produce tornadoes, hail at least 1 inch in diameter, or straight-line winds of 58 miles per hour or higher, cause an average of 200 deaths every single year in the United States. They account for half of all billion-dollar weather disasters that have hit this country since 1980. Half. Not hurricanes, not floods alone. Severe storms, the thunderstorms forming over the plains on an ordinary spring afternoon, the supercells spinning up along a dry line in Oklahoma, the derechos racing across the Midwest at 90 miles per hour. These systems are responsible for more billion-dollar disaster events than any other category of weather. And in 1980, the United States averaged roughly $3 billion weather events per year. In 2024, there were 27 of them, 17 of which were severe storm events, involving tornadoes, hail, or straight-line winds. The country now averages $1 billion disaster approximately every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks. Get ready, because the engine behind every one of these storms, the supercell thunderstorm, is something most people have never truly understood, and that lack of understanding is costing lives. A supercell is not an ordinary thunderstorm that got a little bigger. It is a fundamentally different atmospheric machine. It is a highly organized, self-sustaining storm system with a powerful rotating updraft called a mesocyclone that can reach speeds of 100 miles per hour. The mesocyclone forms when the storm's rising air column encounters veering winds that shift direction and increase in speed with altitude, twisting the updraft until the entire column of air inside the storm is rotating. That rotation is what separates a supercell from everything else in the atmosphere. It is what allows a single storm to stay organized and violent for hours, traveling hundreds of miles while continuously producing tornadoes, giant hail, and catastrophic straight-line winds. Not all supercells produce tornadoes, but nearly every significant tornado, every EF2 and above that destroys neighborhoods and kills people, comes from a supercell. They are the apex predators of the storm world, and they are becoming more common. The 2025 severe weather season was one of the most violent and expensive in American history. In March of 2025, a single tornado outbreak spanning 6 days produced more than 180 tornadoes across the central, southeastern, and eastern United States. That outbreak alone caused $11 billion in damage and killed 43 people, making it not only the second most costly weather event of 2025, but the single deadliest. Then, in May 2025, another outbreak of approximately 60 tornadoes swept across the central and eastern United States, producing large hail and severe thunderstorm winds that caused $6.3 billion in additional damage. The entire 2025 severe weather season set records in multiple categories, with nearly 2/3 of the year's tornadoes occurring in the 3-month window from March through May. And when the final accounting was done, the United States had experienced 23 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters in 2025 alone, causing 276 deaths and $115 billion in damage. The third highest damage total since modern record-keeping began in 1980. Stay alert, because the violent spring of 2025 was not an endpoint. It was a runway leading into an even more dangerous 2026. In just the single month of April 2026, the United States was hit by multiple catastrophic, severe weather sequences that left communities across the Midwest and South reeling before the official heart of tornado season had even arrived. And the month did not begin quietly either. As early as February 19th, 2026, the Storm Prediction Center issued an enhanced risk of severe weather due to unseasonably rich moisture overlapping with a powerful low-pressure system across southern Illinois and Indiana. That evening, a single cyclic supercell tracked more than 150 miles through the risk area, producing an EF2 tornado in Bloomington, Indiana that triggered a particularly dangerous situation tornado warning for the city itself, and an EF3 tornado near Union City, Michigan, that killed 3 people and injured 12 others. The worst damage near Union Lake left homes swept completely off their foundations. Then, in early March, a mother and daughter were killed in Major County, Oklahoma, when an EF2 tornado struck their vehicle. Days later, a large EF3 tornado tore through the southern portions of Kankakee, Illinois, and neighboring Indiana, damaging over 500 buildings, killing 3 people, and producing what may be record-breaking hailstones measuring 5 to 6 inches in diameter, which, if confirmed, would shatter the previous Illinois state record. Get ready, because on April 17th and 18th, a major tornado outbreak tore across the Midwestern United States, the upper Midwest, and the Southern Plains. The Storm Prediction Center had issued a moderate risk for severe weather, the second highest level on the 5-step scale, covering northern Oklahoma, central and eastern Kansas, and western Missouri, with warnings of very large to giant hail, extreme damaging winds, and strong to intense tornadoes. What followed was a multi-state assault. An EF2 tornado tracked through southern portions of Rochester, Minnesota, damaging multiple homes. The town of Lena, Illinois, was struck by a large high-end EF2 tornado causing significant structural damage. An EF3 tornado tracked through areas near Wausau, Wisconsin, tearing off most of the exterior walls of a home and destroying outbuildings. Over 24 separate tornadoes struck central Illinois alone, with multiple tornado warnings issued even for the National Weather Service office in Lincoln, Illinois itself. The Fox River in Wisconsin crested at 12.1 feet on April 18th, breaking the record set in 1979. Roughly 1,800 people required evacuation in the New London area. Parts of Milwaukee flooded. Rivers in Michigan and Wisconsin hit major or record flood levels in over 20 locations. And that was one outbreak, on one weekend in 1 month of one spring. Get ready, because April 2026 was not finished after that. 6 days later, on April 23rd, a new outbreak erupted and immediately produced one of the most violent single tornadoes to strike the United States in more than a year. The Enid, Oklahoma tornado developed on the evening of April 23rd as part of a severe weather system associated with a strongly unstable air mass across northern Oklahoma, rich, low-level moisture, steep lapse rates, and powerful vertical wind shear, creating conditions that meteorologists describe as perfect for supercell thunderstorm M development. The tornado that produced a stovepipe silhouette visible for miles slammed into the southern side of Enid with winds, estimated between 170 and 175 miles per hour, earning an official EF4 rating and triggering a rare tornado emergency declaration. At least 40 homes were damaged in the Gray Ridge neighborhood. Residents were trapped in homes and storm shelters after the storm passed. Vance Air Force Base was so severely impacted, it remained closed until power and water could be fully restored. Then the outbreak sequence continued. On April 25th, a moderate risk was issued for portions of Oklahoma and Texas. On April 26th, twin tornadoes were observed near Foraker, Oklahoma. On April 27th, a particularly dangerous situation tornado warning was issued in Arkansas for an observed destructive tornado tracking through Stone County, staying on the ground for approximately 10 miles with debris lofted high into the atmosphere. On April 28th, the Dallas-Fort Worth area faced a level 4 severe storm risk with baseball-sized hail forecast as likely. When the final death toll from that 6-day sequence was counted, at least 8 people had lost their lives. 32 tornadoes were confirmed during the April 17th outbreak alone, and the relentless multi-day assault of April 23rd through 28th killed additional victims in Texas, injured dozens across multiple states, and displaced families from Runaway Bay to the Arkansas Ozarks to the suburbs of Oklahoma City. Stay alert, because this is the pattern that forecasters are now describing as the new severe weather reality in America. AccuWeather meteorologist Alex Duffus said it plainly when assessing the 2026 season: do not let your guard down. Flash floods and damaging wind gusts can be just as destructive as tornadoes and often impact a much larger area. He warned of an increased likelihood of severe thunderstorms packing damaging wind gusts and heavy downpours, and identified flash flooding as one of the biggest concerns of the entire season. The forecast for 2026 calls for 1,050 to 1,250 tornadoes across the United States for the year, which is right around the historical average. But that number is almost completely irrelevant to an individual community, because as forecasters keep being forced to repeat to a public that keeps forgetting, it only takes one storm striking a densely populated or vulnerable community to make this a devastating season. The historical average offers no protection whatsoever to the family in the direct path of the one tornado that forms in their county on an otherwise quiet afternoon. Get ready, because the science of why severe storms are becoming more explosive and more frequent is not complicated, and it is not disputed among researchers. The atmosphere is warming. A warmer atmosphere holds more moisture. approximately 7% more water vapor for every 1 degree Celsius of temperature increase. That additional moisture is the fuel for convective storms. Thunderstorms are moisture-driven engines. When more moisture is available in the low levels of the atmosphere and it gets drawn upward into a developing storm, the amount of energy released through condensation increases dramatically. More condensation means more latent heat release. More latent heat means stronger updrafts. Stronger updrafts mean more powerful thunderstorm cells, more intense hail, stronger straight-line winds, and a greater capacity for tornado production when the other ingredients, wind shear, instability, a source of lift, are also present. The physics are direct and documented. A warming atmosphere is a more energetic atmosphere, and a more energetic atmosphere produces more violent storms. Stay alert and understand what the research is now projecting for the future of supercell thunderstorms specifically. A major study published in 2023 projects a 6.6% increase in supercell frequency nationwide by the end of the century as a result of climate warming. The same research projects increases concentrated heavily in the early months of the year. Nearly 15% more supercells in February, 36% more in March, and nearly 66% more in April by the year 2100 under a high warming scenario. These are not the summer months that people traditionally associate with tornado season. They are the winter and early spring months when people are less psychologically prepared, when the population has not yet entered its seasonal state of awareness, and when the homes and communities in the path of these storms are often not built or designed with severe weather in mind. The tornado season is expanding into the months when people are least ready for it. Stay alert because the hail threat specifically deserves its own alarm. Large hail, stones larger than 5 centimeters in diameter, is one of the most costly severe storm hazards in North America, with annual insured losses routinely exceeding $10 billion across the continent. A single hailstorm in Calgary, Canada, in August 2024 became the second costliest extreme weather event in Canadian history, generating over $3.2 billion in insured losses in a matter of hours. The risk of very large hailstones has risen by approximately 50% in and around Dallas, Texas, over the measurable period of study. In Europe, a hailstone measuring 19 centimeters in diameter, the largest ever documented on that continent, fell in northern Italy in 2023, part of a series of thunderstorms in that region that resulted in record losses of $8.6 billion. The frequency of severe hailstorms is increasing more rapidly in Europe than anywhere else in the world, according to researchers from the European Severe Storms Laboratory and Munich Re, who analyzed weather data from 1950 to 2023 and found statistically significant correlations between hail event frequency and global warming. The hail is getting bigger, the storms producing it are getting more energetic, and the areas at risk are expanding beyond the historically recognized high-risk zones. Get ready, because straight-line winds, the wind damage that does not come from a tornado's rotation, but from a thunderstorm's collapsing downdraft hitting the ground and spreading outward, are getting faster as the atmosphere warms. Recent research shows that thunderstorm straight-line wind speeds in the central United States have intensified by 7% for every degree Fahrenheit of warming recorded over the period from 1980 to 2020, 7% per degree. With very high levels of future warming, large straight-line wind systems known as derechos are projected to become more frequent, more widespread, and more intense across the central and eastern United States. A derecho is a line of intense thunderstorm-produced straight-line winds extending more than 240 miles and causing widespread damage. They are the severe weather events that do not get the dramatic video footage of a visible tornado funnel, and yet they can flatten crops across entire states, knock out power for millions of people at once, and generate gusts exceeding 100 miles per hour across corridors hundreds of miles long. When the storms are this wide, this fast, and this invisible to people waiting to see a funnel cloud before they take shelter, the death toll from a single event can be catastrophic with almost no warning. Stay alert because one of the most dangerous categories of supercell, one that receives almost no mainstream attention, is what meteorologists call the high-precipitation supercell, or HP supercell. In a classic supercell, the rotating updraft and wall cloud are visible from miles away, giving observers and storm spotters the ability to track the storm's behavior and issue timely warnings. In an HP supercell, the updraft is surrounded and obscured by heavy precipitation on all sides. The wall cloud and any developing tornado are completely hidden inside what forecasters call the bear's cage, a shroud of rain and hail so dense that the violent rotation at the storm's core is invisible until the tornado is already on the ground. These are rain-wrapped tornadoes, and they are among the most lethal events in severe weather because the visual warning that people rely on, the visible funnel descending from a dark cloud, simply does not exist. Residents standing in what appears to be heavy rain have been killed by rain. wrapped tornadoes that gave no visible warning whatsoever. As moisture content in the atmosphere increases and storms become more precipitation heavy, the frequency of HP supercells and rain-wrapped tornadoes is a growing concern in regions where people already have less severe weather experience. Get ready, because flash flooding, the component of severe storms that kills more Americans than any other weather-related hazard in most years, is accelerating in frequency and severity in ways that compound every other storm danger. Between 1958 and 2021, total rainfall on the heaviest 1% of precipitation days increased in almost every region of the United States. The extreme downpours are getting more extreme, and globally, flash flooding was 20 times more frequent from 2000 to 2022 than it was from 1900 to 1999. 20 times. That is not a gradual trend. That is a step change in the behavior of extreme rainfall that reflects the fundamental physical reality of a warmer, wetter atmosphere, releasing its moisture in shorter, more concentrated bursts rather than steady, manageable rainfall spread across time. In April 2026, the Great Lakes region came through one of its wettest starts to spring on record. Chicago and Milwaukee had seen so many rounds of heavy rain before the April 17th tornado outbreak that flash flooding was already underway when the severe storms arrived. The Wolf River in Wisconsin was nearly a foot above its previous record flood stage, with streets submerged across entire villages and evacuation orders already in effect. And then the tornadoes came on top of it. Communities that were already dealing with flood emergencies were simultaneously facing tornado emergencies. First responders trying to manage flood rescues in Wisconsin were simultaneously responding to tornado damage in Illinois. The overlapping, compounding nature of severe weather is one of the defining features of the modern storm environment. Get ready, because the economic cost of all of this is on a trajectory that should make every local government, every homeowner, every business owner urgently rethink their risk calculations. A study from the University of Chicago estimates a greater than 90% probability that United States weather disaster damage between 2026 and 2030 will exceed $500 billion, and a 54% probability that it will surpass $1 trillion. $1 trillion of damage from storms, floods, fires, and extreme weather in 5 years. That is not a fringe projection from an advocacy organization. It is a peer-reviewed risk analysis from one of the most respected research universities in America. The country already averages $1 billion disaster every 2 weeks. The trajectory of that curve, driven by a warming atmosphere and the expansion of development into high-risk areas, points toward even greater frequency and even greater cost in the years immediately ahead. Stay alert, because the overlap between where people are building and where severe weather risk is expanding is genuinely alarming. Tornado Alley, the historically recognized high-risk corridor from central Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, has been the focus of severe weather preparedness for decades. But researchers are documenting a significant shift in tornado activity eastward into what meteorologists are now calling Dixie Alley, the Tennessee Valley, the Mid-South, and the southeastern states, where population density is higher and tornado-resistant construction is far less common than in the traditional plain states. The frequency of favorable tornado days has increased significantly in Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana since 1979. These states now face a tornado threat that rivals or exceeds what traditional Tornado Alley has historically experienced. And yet, the infrastructure of preparedness, the community shelters, the safe room programs, the institutional awareness drilled into children from elementary school, is far less developed in these regions. The 2025 central tornado outbreak that killed 43 people in March demonstrated this threat with brutal clarity, with tornadoes tracking through central, southeastern, and eastern states where mobile homes are more prevalent, storm shelters are less common, and the geography, rolling hills, dense tree cover, makes tornadoes harder to see and harder to outrun. A tornado on the open plains of western Kansas can be spotted from 20 miles away. A rain-wrapped tornado moving through the Tennessee hills at midnight is almost invisible until it is on top of you. Get ready, because the warning systems that stand between a severe storm and a mass casualty event are under pressure in ways that compound every physical threat. In Michigan, during one of the 2026 spring outbreaks, neither a tornado watch nor a severe thunderstorm watch was in effect when tornadoes struck, because the storm was initially concentrated in a small 3-county area that made advanced detection difficult. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer called for a probe into the absence of warning and questioned whether it was connected to funding cutbacks at the National Weather Service. At any given moment on this planet, there are 1,800 thunderstorms in progress somewhere on Earth. 16 million storms per year globally. and the national conversation around whether America's weather warning infrastructure is being properly resourced and maintained at the exact moment when the storms requiring that infrastructure are becoming more frequent and more violent is one of the most urgent and underreported public safety discussions happening right now. NOAA's Warn on Forecast research project is working to extend tornado warning lead times by issuing warnings before the hazard is imminent rather than after it is already detected. But that research depends on the funding and infrastructure required to sustain it. Stay alert. Know your risk. Know your county. Know whether you are in a tornado-prone zone, a flash flood zone, a hail corridor, or a region where derechos historically strike. Know that the highest hail risk in 2026 runs from Texas through Alabama, with a secondary hotspot across Iowa, northern Missouri, eastern Nebraska, and northeastern Kansas. Know that by May of this severe weather season, the primary tornado risk shifts toward the traditional tornado alley from central Texas to eastern Nebraska. Know that flash flooding can strike anywhere that receives intense rainfall, regardless of whether you are on a river near a coast or deep in the interior. Know that a level 4 of 5 severe weather risk from the Storm Prediction Center means that major life-threatening events are not just possible, but specifically expected in the highlighted area, and that a level 5 particularly dangerous situation declaration means the highest end, most violent weather imaginable is occurring or imminent. Get ready and act before the sirens go. The people who survive severe storms reliably are the ones who had a plan before the storm was on the radar. They had identified their safe room or storm shelter. They had charged their weather alert devices and kept a battery-powered NOAA weather radio as a backup for when the power goes out and the cell towers are overwhelmed. They had a family communication plan with a designated out-of-area contact person, a specific meeting point, and a practiced routine that everyone in the household could execute without thinking. They had taught their children where to go, and they had drilled it so that moving to safety was an automatic response rather than a panicked decision made under flying debris. They understood the difference between a tornado watch, conditions are favorable, be prepared, and a tornado warning. A tornado is occurring or imminent, take action immediately. They knew that if a tornado appears to be standing still on the horizon, it is almost certainly moving directly toward them. They knew that a loud, continuous roar like a freight train or jet engine, even without a visible funnel, means a tornado may already be on the ground nearby. The people who are killed in severe storms are disproportionately those who did not know about the warning, did not have a shelter to reach in time, or who made the decision to wait and see before acting. The window between a tornado warning and a tornado strike in some areas is measured in minutes. In some of the storms that struck in April 2026, the gap between the issuance of a tornado emergency and impact on residential neighborhoods was less than 12 minutes. 12 minutes is not enough time to decide whether you should take it seriously. The decision has to already be made. Severe storms are about to explode. They are already exploding. They have been exploding across the central United States every spring with greater intensity and greater cost for years. And the physical forces driving that escalation, a warmer atmosphere, deeper atmospheric moisture, stronger instability, a warming that holds more energy for every storm system that forms, are not going away. They are getting stronger. The forecast for this season calls for damaging wind gusts, dangerous hail, flash flooding concerns across broad areas, and tornadoes capable of reaching EF3 and above when supercell thunderstorms find the right combination of moisture, instability, and shear to produce their most violent rotations. It only takes one. It only takes one storm striking your town, your neighborhood, your street, on one of the coming days of the season to turn everything ordinary about your life into an emergency. Stay alert. Get ready. The atmosphere is loaded, the season is building, and the storms are coming.